All right, guys, this is your homework for Wednesday, February the 3rd. You should be filling in the blanks on your handout that you got in class today. If you don't have your handout for whatever reason, you should be taking Cornell notes in your journal so that you have all of the same information. Let's get started. So first of all, you need to know our standard. We've just started our unit on viruses, and the part that we're going to be focusing on today is right here where it says compare the structures of viruses to cells. We're going to get into some more information about viruses as we go through the unit, but today we're going to focus just on the structure. And our essential question for the day is, how are viruses put together? And how do they differ from cells? So as we're going through this PowerPoint in this video, you may want to write down some additional information, some things that are not already on your handout, just to make sure that you are getting everything that you think is important and things that you'll need to know. First off, you guys need to know some vocabulary. A virus is a non-cellular, or sometimes people say acellular, pathogen. Non-cellular or acellular means that it's not the same thing as a cell. So it's not a prokaryote or a eukaryote because it's not a cell. Now then we have this other word, pathogen. Okay, so what is a pathogen? A pathogen is any disease-causing agent. So pathogen can be a virus, it can be a bacteria that makes you sick, a fungus that makes you sick, a protist that makes you sick. Anything that can cause disease or make you sick in some way is considered to be a pathogen. Now this week we're going to focus on viruses. Next week we'll look at some other things that you might run across in your regular everyday environment that can make you sick. But for right now, we're going to stick with viruses. The next word, virology. Okay, virology, the study of viruses. Anytime you see that prefix, VIR, on a word that you don't really know, it probably has something to do with viruses. So virology, the study of viruses. And then going along those same lines, virion is a viral particle or just one little piece of a virus. That's going to come in handy to know that when we start talking about the cycles or how viruses make more viruses. So we'll be talking about virions. Next, I want you guys to look at the difference in sizes. This is a way to help you remember that viruses are not cells, and the fact that viruses are so much smaller than actual cells. So if we were to look at a eukaryotic cell, this whole thing right here is a eukaryotic cell. The nucleus here in the middle is about the same size as most prokaryotic cells. And then a virus is this tiny little thing right here, even smaller than a prokaryotic cell. And as it says over here in the corner here, if a cell was the size of our classroom, so if our room was a cell and we were all organelles and things inside the cell, then a virus would be about the size of a softball in your hand inside that classroom. So they're significantly smaller than eukaryotic and prokaryotic cells. This slide here is just to show you some typical viruses or some common viruses compared with some other types of cells. So first over here in the corner we have a human red blood cell. Okay, so this is just the edge of a red blood cell. You have millions of those running through your veins, your arteries right now. In comparison to that, next to it we have an E. coli. If you remember from last week, we talked about how you guys all have E. coli in your intestines. They help you digest your food. And then right here we have chlamydia. Chlamydia is a sexually transmitted disease, so hopefully none of you guys have chlamydia in your system right now. But if you did, you would know now that it's a pretty small little type of bacteria. And all of these blue things here are types of viruses. Okay, so the biggest of these that we're showing here is Ebola, which is kind of this funky candy cane with spikes on it sort of shape. That's the biggest one on our page, and it's still quite a bit smaller than an E. coli. We have the rabies virus that kind of looks like a bullet. We've got the adenovirus that causes colds. The polio virus is a really, really tiny one. So there's all sorts of shapes and sizes of viruses. Now let's look at what viruses are actually made of. So the basic components we have here, all viruses have some sort of a genetic material. Okay, genetic material, just like cells do. It will either be DNA or RNA. Okay, right here in the middle, this little squiggly thing right here, that's the DNA. And it makes up what we call the core, or the center of the virus. The second thing that all viruses have is a capsid, or sometimes you'll see that called a protein coat. Now, a protein coat is pretty much like it sounds. It's made of proteins, you see right here, and it surrounds that core, or it surrounds the DNA. So it covers it up just like a coat covers up your body when it's cold. The capsid covers up or surrounds the genetic material that's on the inside. And remember, all viruses have these. So on your handout, you have a copy of this picture right here, and then some blanks. So make sure that you fill in the blanks and label that picture, your capsid and your nucleic acid there in the middle. There's all different shapes and sizes to viruses. This is one that's called a tobacco mosaic virus. And right here you see, this is a picture of it under a microscope. And you can see that it just looks kind of like a big long stick. And what it is, it's just those two pieces. It's just the genetic material, in this case RNA, which is this green squiggly thing here, and the protein coat, which is these little purple things that stick out from the side and go all the way around that curl until it stacks up and it just looks like this big stick. There are some viruses that have more parts to it. Okay, some viruses have what we call a viral envelope. Okay, just like you use an envelope to put a letter or something like that in, some viruses have an envelope, something that surrounds it on the outside. A viral envelope is made of lipids, just like a cell membrane. Okay, that's one thing that they have in common with cells. The viral envelope goes around the outside of the capsid, and you're only going to find that on some kinds of viruses. Not all, just some. The other thing that you'll find on some viruses is what we call spikes. Okay, sometimes you'll see it listed as a glycoprotein or a receptor or something like that, but it's these little spiky things that come out of the outside of the envelope. Okay, they're used to attach onto cells when the virus is trying to infect a cell. And you're only going to find those spikes on viruses that have envelopes because, like I said, they're surrounding the outside of the envelope here. And again, you guys have this picture on your handout, so make sure that you are filling in your blanks and labeling the parts of your virus picture here. That's the same kind of thing that you'll be doing on your project. When you draw the virus, you will need to label things like the nucleic acid, the capsid, the envelope if it has one, and the spikes if it has one. And here's a picture of what we call an adenovirus. And you can see this is a drawing of it, but this is some adenoviruses actually under a microscope. And you can see it does have that kind of weird shape to it. And you have the spikes coming out This light blue part is the envelope, and then the dark blue on the inside would be the capsid, and then you can see the swirly genetic material on the inside. This next slide again is just a bunch of pictures of different viruses just to show you the different sizes, but also all of the different shapes that viruses come in. So we have some examples here. The herpes virus. Okay, we've got a capsid that's surrounded by an envelope. We have the adenovirus that we saw on another page there. The rhabdovirus, which is the rabies virus, okay, which you can see the genetic material here. You can see the envelope with the spikes. You have the influenza virus or the flu virus right over here. And I'll tell you what, I will give 5 bonus points on your homework grade if you tell me, or write on your page, tell me what the ORF virus is. What does it infect? What disease does it cause? Tell me about the ORF virus, and I'll add 5 points onto your homework grade. So the next thing we need to talk about here is specificity. That's kind of a weird word, specificity. What that means is that viruses are very specific to the type of cells that they infect. Not all viruses can infect just anything. They're very, very specific. So plant viruses infect plant cells. The tobacco mosaic virus, that little long skinny one that we saw before, that one only infects tomato plants. I don't know why it's called a tobacco mosaic if it infects tomato plants, but there it is. So plant viruses infect plant cells. Animal viruses only infect animals that are related to each other. Bacterial viruses only infect bacteria. Now we call those bacteriophages. Okay, bacteriophage is a word that you will probably see again, and that just means a virus that infects bacteria. And that's these guys over here that kind of look like this creepy little spider that's going to come attack all of your cells. So we have the DNA on the inside, the head or the capsid here, and then it has a neck, and this is called the sheath here, and then these little tail fibers coming off of it. I want you to use this picture right here to label the bacteriophage that you have on your handout. Do the best job that you can. This picture over here on the right is actually a drawing of the Zika virus. If you've been paying attention to the news, you know the Zika virus is something that is a concern for a lot of people right now. And so looking at this, you can see that it's got RNA on the inside, which means that it's something called a retrovirus. We talked about retroviruses in class today. It's got the capsid, that's this green part here. It has an envelope, and then it has these glycoprotein spikes or receptors on the outside. Now, we've been talking a lot about living things. We talked about taxonomy and how we classify and how we group living things. And if you think back to the first week of school, we talked about the characteristics of life. In order for something to be considered alive or living, it has to have all 7 of these characteristics. So the first one is that it responds to the environment. In other words, if something around it happens or changes, then that thing or that organism will do something in response. So like if somebody pokes you, you're probably going to respond in some way, either move away or yell or hit them or something. So that's a response to the environment. The second characteristic is evolutionary adaptation. That's something that has to happen over a long period of time, but basically it just means that it will change over a period of time. Third characteristic is that it has order, and in this case that basically means that it's made of cells. The fourth one is that it grows and develops, so not only gets bigger, but that it changes and matures over time. Next is that it processes energy or requires nutrients. The next one is that it reproduces, and so basically just that it can make more. And the last one is that it maintains homeostasis. So if something gets out of balance, then it will try and correct itself. So like your body, when you get too hot, your body does something to try and cool it off, which is sweating. If you get too cold, your body does something to try and warm it up, which is shivering. Now viruses, they have some of these characteristics. So viruses can adapt and change over time. There's lots of examples of viruses that have kind of mutated to affect different kinds of organisms. HIV is a really good example of that. Best we can figure, it started off as an ape virus and then mutated to infect humans. There are a couple of other ones that you could maybe make an argument about whether viruses respond to the environment or if they grow and develop, or if they maintain homeostasis. But there's a couple of things for sure that they don't have. And the first one, and the most important maybe, is made of cells. They are not made of cells. Cells have organelles. Cells produce proteins. And viruses don't do that. They don't make proteins. They also cannot reproduce on their own. Now, when I say on their own, I mean with other viruses or by using their own parts to do it. The only way that a virus can reproduce is by using a cell's what we call machinery. So going into a cell and taking over all of the parts and using it to make more virus parts. So a virus can't do that on its own. It has to have a cell in order to do that. And then the third thing is that it does not require any nutrients. Cells don't eat, they don't need food, they don't need minerals, they don't need anything like that. All they need is a place to infect and reproduce and make more. So what that means is that viruses are not alive because they do not have all of the characteristics of life. Make sure that you have filled in all the blanks on your handout. If you need to go back and watch the video over again, please do so. Make sure that you come in tomorrow ready to take a homework quiz and get right down to work.